Well, hello, everybody. I'm smiling at you right now. What do you mean you can't see me smiling? I can't smile more than the way I'm smiling right now. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, I know we're all watching everybody and we're trying to be safe, and I want to caution you, always be safe. And Betty and I were talking a little bit about that, so I'm going to wear the mask for a while. At some point, I'm going to drop down because you never know, somebody might want to start reading my lips. So read my lips. We're starting at, oh, that's right, you can't read my lips right now. Well, whatever, we are ready to continue with a collection of bedtime Bible stories for children by Father Homer Rogers. As a matter of fact, you know, Betty, you know some of his grandchildren, and if I showed you their pictures, you'd figure out because they go to Camp Cruces. And Betty really likes Camp Cruces, which is a summer camp that she and her sister and others in the family go to. In fact, your mom and your dad met at Camp Cruces, didn't they?
Yeah.
Whoa. So you understand, everybody, you should probably think about going to camp some year. You might meet some really fun people. Well, let's see. The first time we got together to read, Betty, we talked about God creating...
Adam and Eve.
Yeah, and then last time, that's right, Adam and Eve. But we found out, didn't we, that not everybody listens all the time.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this down for a little while because we are keeping appropriate distance, by the way, Betty and I. And yeah, see that? Whoa, look at her. She's being really appropriate. And we are this week going to look at the 3rd chapter of Genesis, and it's called The Fall. And as I said last time, it doesn't mean like what happens when you're standing on a stepladder. It's a different kind of a fall. Do you remember the bad angels?
Yes.
Okay. While God was making Adam and Eve and showing them around the garden, they were watching from a great way off with angry interest. The wicked angels couldn't stand to see so much happiness and to see everything so peaceful. They get into the garden and wreck it just for spite. The leader of the bad angels, we'll call him Satan, which means the enemy, said to the rest of the bad angels, "Leave this to me. I know just the thing." "What are you going to do?" asked the other bad angels. "I'm going to get them on our side against God," replied Satan with an angry snarl. Can you make a snarl sound? Yeah. As if just mentioning God's name upset him terribly. "How are you going to do that? With lust, or maybe with greed or gluttony?" asked some of the other bad angels. "No," hissed Satan. Can you hiss? Can you do that? You lost a tooth a few weeks ago. Can you still hiss? You did it. You did it perfectly. And he hissed, "Those sins are too little, are unworthy of a great tempter like me. Pride is the great sin. Pride. I'm going to get them to trust their own judgment rather than God's revelation. Corrupt them in the mind, the part that's most like us angels. That's the real trick. I'll leave the sins of their animal part to you lesser tempters later on." So Satan crept up to the garden and watched and waited for a time when Adam and Eve were separated because he knew it would be a lot easier to confuse them when they couldn't consult with one another, and they might be ashamed to sin if someone else was watching. Oh, Satan was a smart one, he was. Finally, he saw Eve wandering off from Adam, and he followed her because he saw she was going in the direction of the tree with fruit that God had told her and Adam not to eat. Eve knew she was alone, so she was quite startled when she heard someone say in a silky, smart alecky tone of voice, "Hi there." She looked all around, but couldn't see anybody. Again, she heard the voice. Here I am. That didn't help a bit, because the owner of the voice was still invisible, and he didn't say where he was. Who are you? Eve asked. She heard a chuckle. Yeah, it's just me. Don't you dislike people who talk to you that way? The leader of the bad angels was teasing Eve, and teasing is a nasty way of hurting someone. Eve looked and looked, and all she could see was a small and very lovely green and yellow snake that stared at her with beady black eyes and flicked its little forked tongue at her in the way that snakes do. Eve was fascinated, entranced. She was new on earth and didn't know for sure whether or not snakes had the power of speech. The voice continued, the snake continued, flicking its tongue at her. I understand you can eat anything in the garden, just anything. Well, that's not exactly right, Eve answered. We're not allowed to eat the fruit of this tree right over there. Well, now, what do you know about that? Replied the voice. All sugar and honey. You can't eat the fruit of this tree. Something about the way he said it made Eve feel sort of ashamed that she was not allowed to eat of this fruit. Like a little girl wearing pigtails at a party where everyone else had a grown-up hairstyle. And why can't you eat of this fruit? The voice continued. Eve explained patiently that God had forbidden it, and that if she did eat it, she would die, whatever that meant. She almost had tears in her eyes when she said it. You know, the voice came right back. Oh, for goodness sake. How silly. How could it kill you to eat such good-looking fruit? Why, I'll bet you the truth is that eating that fruit will fill you with wisdom, and you'll know so much that God will be jealous of you. Then you'll be as good as him. He doesn't want that. Take just a teensy-weensy little bite of that fruit and see if I'm not right. Eve was watching the snake all this time as he coyly cocked his head on one side. It seemed as if one beady black eye winked quickly. But Eve couldn't be sure. The serpent fascinated her, but she hated it because it made her feel so unsure of herself. Then the snake made a little hissing noise that sounded like sissy. After all, the fruit did look good, and Eve didn't know what wisdom meant, but it sounded so grown up and sophisticated. And besides, who did God think he was telling her what she could and couldn't do? And she wasn't going to let any snake hiss sissy at her and get away with it. And before she knew it, she was biting down on the fruit. And it tasted delicious. And then the strangest thing happened inside her. For the first time in her short life, she really noticed herself. Before, she'd been too busy being happy and enjoying all the wonderful things God had made and put in the garden. But now suddenly she felt and seemed quite painfully aware of herself. She seemed terribly alone. She looked for the snake, thinking that even that might afford her some company. But the snake had vanished into the grass. She suddenly became terribly afraid. All she could think of was finding Adam right away. She ran like lightning back to where Adam had been when she left him, and there he was. But he looked so big and stupid and innocent and, well, inexperienced that he didn't seem to help her much. All at once she knew that Adam had to eat the fruit too, so he could know and understand how she felt. Adam was dismayed when she told him what she had done, but she held out the fruit and teased him with her voice like the snake had teased her and said, "Don't be a sissy. Take a bite. It won't hurt you." She was afraid for a moment that he was going to refuse, but she put her hands on her hips, Can you do that and show what that looks like? That's right. That's exactly right. And cocked her head to one side. Yep. And stuck out her tongue at him. Like the snake had done, and once again said, "Sissy." That did it. Adam squared his shoulders, stuck out his chest, took the fruit, took a big bite, munched on it. Yep. With the silliest smug look in his face. Like any little boy showing off what a man he is before his best girlfriend. But then all of a sudden, Adam felt like he had an upset stomach inside his head. And he looked at Eve, and Eve looked at him, and he began to cry. "Oh, Adam," she wailed, "why did you let me do it?" Adam felt like it was a silly question because he hadn't let her do it at all. And besides, he had done it too. Adam wanted to cry. But he couldn't because he had only eaten the fruit to show Eve he wasn't a sissy. And he felt that crying would be sissy. He wanted to take her in his arms and comfort her, but he couldn't do that either, so he just stood there looking at her stupidly. Finally, Eve stopped crying and said reproachfully, "Why, Adam, you don't have any clothes on." "Confounded woman," Adam shouted at her, "don't you be so high and mighty with me. You didn't seem to mind it yesterday. Besides, you don't have any clothes on either." He looked at Eve angrily, and she immediately became remorseful and said, "Oh, Adam, we've been quarreling. We can't just stand here naked fussing at each other. What will we do?" Adam was still angry and said sourly, "Well, I guess we could make some clothes." So they set out to look for something to make themselves clothes, something that would work, and all they could find that looked promising were fig leaves. They tried sewing them together, but the stitches would pull out almost right away, and they were both in a pretty bad temper because it took much longer than they had thought it would. Suddenly, Eve looked up and said, "What's that?" "Just your guilty conscience," grumbled Adam. "Keep on with your work." "Oh, Adam, I know I heard something. I bet it's God. What do we do?" "Here, quick," said Adam, suddenly alarmed. "Hide in the bushes." Sure enough, it was God. And he called out and said, "Adam, where are you?" Adam knew he couldn't hide himself any longer, so he stepped out, clutching a ragged fig leaf apron, and said, "I was hiding because I was naked." God said, "Adam, you've eaten that fruit. I told you it would make trouble." Adam blushed all over, but he just couldn't bring himself to be completely honest. So he blamed her on Eve. "She told me to do it," he said, lamely pointing at Eve. And Eve was just as bad as Adam. She blamed it on the snake. Now, God was more sorry for them than he was angry. He said to Adam and Eve, "You're going to have trouble with that snake from now on. There will be constant warfare between your children and the snake, and mankind will be badly wounded in the battle, but one day one of your sons will come along who will defeat the snake utterly." And God said to Eve, "Now you must mind Adam and do what he tells you, and don't go wandering off by yourself like that." Then he said to Adam, "Because you let Eve tempt you and ate the fruit I told you not to eat, you are going to have to work much harder than you ever imagined for your food. That's just the way it is. You're like spoiled children, both of you. And the only way you'll ever amount to anything is through pain and sorrow and hard work. I'm sorry, but one day you will die. And it wouldn't have been necessary at all if you had obeyed me. There's some of the fruit in this garden that's much too dangerous to leave around in front of such disobedient children. You'd better leave the garden." Adam and Eve looked about them, and all the flowers were wilted, and the birds had stopped singing, and the leaves of the trees were turning brown and dropping off their branches. Eve stepped on a nettle with her bare feet and did a little painful dance and said, "Ouch!" God said, "Those fig leaf clothes are no good. Here, wear this." He handed them some clothes made of soft leather. And Adam and Eve got into their new clothes and felt better. A little. Then they wandered off, sad and downcast. And they passed a lion that only yesterday had been friendly. But he snarled at them and they ran. When they finally stopped for breath in a little thicket of brambles, what did they see but that same little green and yellow snake? And he hissed at them, and it sounded like he was saying, "Sissy." And they ran again. And as they glanced back fearfully over their shoulder, they saw something huge and terrible like a cloud. Or was it an angel? And things like lightning flashes danced all around its head. But it might have been a flaming sword. And they were so afraid that they didn't dare to go back that way ever again. And there we are, Adam and Eve. Oh, I know it's tough. And right now we all have to learn what it means to be obedient. We have to listen carefully to what moms and dads and others tell us because they all want us to be healthy and they want us to be safe. And all I know is this, that I am sure having a good time reading this book to you. And I hope some of your friends are able to watch too so that they might be able to see how much fun you and I have when we get together. Thanks to you, Betty, for being a part of it. And thanks to all of you out there. Next week, we'll pick up, and I'm even going to tell you what the theme might be. Are you ready for this? Well, let's put it this way. Adam and Eve had a couple of fellows coming along, and I think they met the snake. God bless you.
Bye.